All right, so part 2 of chapter 3. Ad eas res conficiendas orgetorix deligitur. Well, short sentence for a change, no clauses here. There is a prepositional phrase, ad eas res conficiendas. Do we see a verb somewhere? And of course we do at the very end of the sentence. It's deligitur. Who's the subject of deligitur? Well, the only word that looks nominative is orgetorix. So we have drawn a roadmap very quickly. So, what does it mean? Orgetorix, deligitur, is chosen to carry out these things. Really the exact same gerundive purpose clause used as in the previous sentence. So orgetorix is chosen to carry out these things. Is sibi legationem ad civitates suscepit. Is sibi legationem ad civitates suscepit. Prepositional phrases anywhere. First of all, no clauses, but we do see a prepositional phrase, ad civitates. Verb is suscepit. Our subject is actually is. Is, ea, id, nominative. So is means he. Who do you think that he is referring to? Of course, our old pal, orgetorix. Now, we only have 2 words left, sibi and legationem. Legationem looks pretty accusative case goes em to me, direct object. And then sibi, we'll figure that out in just a second. Looks very similar to tibi, which means to you or for you. Sibi always refers back to the subject, so keep that in mind when we translate it. So let's do it. He, meaning orgetorix, he undertook legationem, an embassy, something like that, a commission. He undertook sibi for himself. He undertook for himself an embassy to the states, meaning like to the nearby nations or peoples, basically. Remember that the Helvetians had strengthened all of this by passing a law saying that in the 3rd year, 3 years from now, we're going to leave. And they also made peace with their neighbors. So here's Orgetorix, who has sort of been put in charge of everything. He's now undertaken for himself an embassy, meaning like he has gone as an ambassador to these states. Undertaken for himself could perhaps imply that he is doing this without the full knowledge of the rest of the Helvetians, that he's doing this somehow in secret, or maybe not. But it does seem to be kind of an odd phrase. He undertook for himself this embassy. Okay, now, what did he do when he went to these other peoples? Here we go. In eo itinere persuadet castico catamantaloides filio sequano, cuius pater regnum in sequanis multos annos obtenuerat, et a senatu populi Romani amicus appellatus erat, ut regnum in civitate sua occuparet, quod pater ante habu erit. Itemque dum Nordigi aeduo fratri diviciaci, qui eo tempore principatum in civitate obtenebat ac maxime plebi acceptus erat, ut idem conaretur persuadet, eique filiam suam in matrimoniam dat. That is quite a mouthful. In eo itinere persuadet castico catamantaloides filio sequano, cuius pater regnum in sequanis multos annos obtenuerat, et a senatu populi Romani amicus appellatus erat, ut regnum in civitate sua occuparet, quod pater ante habuerit. Itemque dum Nordigi aeduo fratri diviciaci, qui eo tempore principatum in civitate obtenebat, ac maxime plebi acceptus erat, ut idem conaretur persuadet, eique filiam suam in matrimonium dat. Okay, let's start with clauses, because there are quite a number here. First one you could see is cuius. And where is that going to end? Well, we could say that it might end at obtenuerat, because there's a verb, but see how there's an et right after it? So maybe it goes a little bit further, and I think it does. It goes here to appellatus erat, followed by a clause, ut, to occuparet, followed once again by a clause, quod, to habueret. So after that, do we see, after the semicolon there, we see at least one more clause, if not more. We've got qui, and that goes, does it go to obtenebat? Well, probably not, because you see ac there, that means and, so it probably goes to acceptus erat. And then we have ut, and that needs to end at a subjunctive verb, which is right here at coneretur. And I think that we are done. So you can see so much of this long sentence involves subordinate clauses or dependent clauses, whatever you want to call them. Prepositional phrases, well, starting the sentence in eo itinere. Moving on, in this first clause we have in sequanis. We also have a senatu. In civitate sua. And in civitate down here. And in matrimonium. Let's take a look at our verbs. So our first big verb, this is really the big verb of the independent clause, is persuaded. And look, it's used all the way down here again as well. Inside this clause, which begins with cuius, we see two verbs, obtenuerat and appellatus erat. This ut clause has one verb, occuparet. This quod clause has a verb, habueret. The qui clause here has two verbs, obtenebat and also acceptus erat. The ut clause here has a subjunctive, coneretur. And then finally, dat. So really we have three verbs that are main verbs of the entire sentence. Persuadet, used once, persuadet, used twice, and dat. And all the other verbs are inside of clauses. How about subject, or words that look nominative? Well, we're going to run into a problem, because if you forget everything that's in brackets and just look at the main independent thought that's being expressed here, you don't see a single nominative word. Now, we know that the subject, though, because if we look at persuadet and dat, T means he, she, it. Who do you think the subject is? It's orgeterix. So, how about inside the clauses, though? Do we see any nominative words? Well, we have pater here. And, let's see, you see the word amicus, meaning friend. Moving on, pater once again. And I believe that is it in terms of nominative words. How about accusatives? Do we see any accusative direct objects? Well, we see regnum right here. Now we do see these words multos annos, but you probably remember those are accusative. I don't think I'm going to mark them in blue because, well, you know what, I'll go ahead. Why not? Multos annos. This is an accusative duration of time for many years. We have regnum once again. And let's see, principatum. And filiam suam. So, believe it or not, we really don't have that many ablative words here. The only ablative words that are jumping out at me right now are eo and tempore, an ablative time at which, at this time. Now, some of you might be saying, but wait a minute, Mr. Allen, what about castico? Oops, I should erase that. Castico and filios, aquano. What about iduo? Well, the thing is, those are actually dative words, because I don't know if you guys remember this, but the verb persuadet is one of those special verbs in Latin that takes a dative direct object. Okay? So now that we've sort of drawn our roadmap here for this big sentence, let's figure it out. I mean, what did Orgetorix actually say to these folks when he went to, perhaps in secret, perhaps not, when he went to them? Well, on this journey, he persuades Casticus, the son of Catamantaloidus, the Sequanian, that's a tribe, whose father, meaning who's Casticus's dad again, that would be Catamantaloidus, whose father had obtained or had held the kingdom among the Sequani for many years, and had been named a friend of the Roman people by the Senate. He persuaded Casticus ut regnum. We have an indirect command here. He persuades Casticus to occupy or seize the kingdom in his own state, the kingdom quod which his father held before. And likewise, he persuades Dumnorix, the Iduan, that's another tribe, the brother of Duwiciacus, who, at this time, was holding the, how to translate this, the chief position in the state, the chief place in the state, and had been received very much by the plebeians, or had been especially received by the plebeians. So likewise he persuades Dumnorix ut idem conaretur, to try the same thing, meaning to take over his kingdom. And he gives him, meaning Dumnorix, Orgetorix gives Dumnorix his daughter in marriage. So that's how he's going to sort of seal his alliance with Dumnorix, is through marriage. So he's trying to persuade Casticus, whose father had been essentially in charge of the Sequani. He tries to persuade him to take over his kingdom, and also persuades Dumnorix to do the same thing. And why is he doing this? Well, because Orgetorix thinks about it, and he thinks, well, my plan is I want to take over as much of Gaul as possible, but I'm going to need some allies to do this. So he sort of forms this alliance with these two other tribes, and they're all going to sort of band together and try and basically take other tribes' land, essentially. So, moving on, let's see, can we finish this up? I think so. Per facile factu esse illis probat conata perficere, propterea quod ipse suae civitatis imperium obtenturus esset. Non esse dubium quintotius Galliae plurimum Helvetii possent, se suis copiis suoque exercitu illis regna conciliatorum confirmat. Wow, that's quite a bit. Now this part gets really, really, really tricky, and sorry, it gets also kind of repetitive. Hans Friedrich does try and help you out. Some of the notes that he gives you on page 18 are good in terms of trying to understand like the basic gist of it. But once again, keep in mind that he's not necessarily being as literal as possible in his notes. So, per facile factu esse illis probat conata perficere, propterea quod ipse suae civitatis imperium obtenturus esset. Non esse dubium quintotius Galliae plurimum Helvetii possent. Se suis copiis suoque exercitu illis regna conciliatorum confirmat. So stopping there, where do we see clauses? Well, we see a clause that's going to start with propteria quod, and we saw that, I believe that was way back in chapter 1 when describing the different peoples of Gaul, and probably going to end there at obtenturos esset. Now, any other clauses that we see? Maybe not so far. Now, what about verbs? Prepositional phrases, rather. I don't actually see any here. Now, what about verbs? We do see a few. We see the word probat here. Inside this clause, we have obtenturus esset. Oh my gosh. Some sort of future active participle plus the subjunctive form of sum, the imperfect subjunctive form. And then moving on, we have, do we see posent right there? And we have confirmat. Okay. Now there's no nominative that I can see anywhere here, with the exception of inside this clause we have the word ipse, he himself, but we could tell from context basically that of course the he himself that's mentioned here is orgeterix. Now I do take that back. There is one other nominative here, helvetii. They're the subject of posent here. Do we see any other verb forms, as in, say, infinitives? And the answer is yes. We've got esse right here. And esse once again. And you don't know it yet, but I'm going to go ahead and mark it for you. Conciliatorum is actually an infinitive. And what's missing after it is that word esse. This is a future active infinitive. And that just looks awful. But hey, it's late and I need to go to sleep. Okay. So subject once again is orgeterix. So this actually leaves us with a lot of words that are unaccounted for. Actually, perficere appear also an infinitive. This leaves us with quite a bit that's unaccounted for, and this is just sort of a strange sentence. Now, before we actually dive in and translate it, we can find some ablative words here. If we look around, let's see here. Where do we see ablative nouns? And if we look here at the very end, suis copiis and suoque exercitu, those are all ablative. Okay. In terms of any accusatives that we see, it looks like we see the word imperium here. That's standing out as accusative. And also regna, which means kingdoms, stands out as being accusative. Okay. Are you ready? Here we go. So probat is our verb of the head. Probo, of course, means to approve or to show or to demonstrate. And the subject is orgeterix, and he's talking to his new pals with whom he's forming an alliance. And he says this. He shows to them or proves to them. And of course, you want to say that. He shows them that it is very easy. Do we see that? A very easy thing to do, to perficere, to carry out these things, conata, having been tried. And it's an awkward and torturous way of doing that. He shows to them, or demonstrates to them, Actually, I think this is the way it works a little bit better. He proves to them, or shows to them, that to carry out the things having been tried is a very easy thing to do, especially because he himself is about to, future active participle, he himself is about to hold power of his own state. And then here Hans Friedrich's note is a little bit helpful, I guess, with known ... when he proved to them that there was no doubt that, and I suppose that is about as good as we can say. He proves to them that there is no doubt but that the Helvetians, plurimum possent is an idiom in Latin that means to be the most powerful, that the Helvetians were the most powerful of all of Gaul. Okay, so, and he proves to them that there was no doubt but that the Helvetians were the most powerful of all of Gaul. So he says, hey, this is an easy thing to do, right? He shows to them that to carry out these things having been tried is a very easy thing to do, because, especially because he himself, hold on one second, sorry about that, that's really loud, especially because he himself was about to hold power of his own state. And he also proves to them that there was no doubt, or that there is no doubt, but that the Helvetians are the most powerful of all of Gaul. And then finally, confirmat. He strengthens, that's what it could mean. It can mean to strengthen, but it can also simply mean to declare, okay? So he declares that, and then who's the subject of conciliatorum esse is se. He declares that he will, notice how it's future with the UR there, he declares that he will win over or secure kingdoms for them, meaning Casticus and Dumnorix. He declares that he will win over kingdoms for them with his own forces and his own army. Oh boy. Well, how can you say no to that, right? Hac oratione adducti inter se fidem et ius jurandum dant et regno occupato per tres potentissimos ac fermissimos populos totius Galliae sese potiri posse sperant. So hac oratione adducti inter se fidem et ius jurandum dant et regno occupato per tres potentissimos ac fermissimos populos totius Galliae sese potiri posse sperant. Let's start with clauses. Do we see any? Actually, I do not. Do we see prepositional phrases? The answer is yes. We have inter se, and we have per tres potentissimos ac firmissimos populos. Looking at our verbs, what do we see? Well, we see dant, D-A-N-T, and we see sperant. Now, there are a couple of infinitives, and those are toward the end here, potiri, which is comes from a deponent verb, and then posse. Now, who's the subject of dant, D-A-N-T? We don't have a specific nominative word that pops up. We do know, of course, that since the verb ends in nt, the subject has to be they. Adducti is a participle that's describing whoever this they is. And they, of course, would be the other two guys, Casticus and Dumnorix. So, what about ablative words? Do we see any ablative words? And the answer is yes, we see quite a number. We've got hac oratione, and then we have regno occupato. Okay. And then do we see any accusative words, direct object? We do. We have fidem and ius jurandum. Some texts print this as one word, Eushirandum. So now that we've sort of drawn a roadmap for it, let's figure it out. It would be the subject, so having been led on or influenced, hakoratione, there's no ablative, no preposition rather, so we have to make one up, by, with, from, and on. Having been influenced by this speech, they give fidem, trust, and an oath among themselves, and with the kingdom having been seized, they hope, and of course this is going to set up indirect statement here, they hope that they are able to obtain potiri, or to gain possession of all of Gaul through 3 very powerful and very strong peoples. Wow. How about that? Okay. So, and with the kingdom having been seized, they hope that they are able to obtain all of Gaul through 3 very powerful and very strong peoples. Okay, potior, that weird deponent verb there, is often followed by a genitive direct object, which is why we've got totius Gallii there serving as sort of a direct object of potiri, but they're not in the accusative case. So there you have it, an unholy alliance has formed here, and what good will come of that? We shall see.